Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire. Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Mike.
How are you doing?
Doing good. It's Friday.
Did you say Friday?
I did for a second.
Then you changed your mind.
Yeah, and then I remembered when I recently got my new air fryer, which I'm kind of excited about.
Oh.
And cooked 2 meals on yesterday. On the top of the box, it says it's Friday, but like F-R-Y. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, that stuff looked pretty good. I'm interested in trying it out.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The Brussels sprouts, which is a hard word to say, the Brussels sprouts were a bust.
Mm-hmm.
And better when I roast them in the oven. But maybe I need to perfect that. But everything else I've made is delicious.
I'm sure you'll get better at it. So for today's episode, we're going to be talking a lot about numbers and investing. And so to kick us off, we also have a question from a listener related to numbers and investing. So I thought we'd tackle that one first.
Okay.
All right. So we got a text message from a listener. I'll read it to you. Hey, Mike and Maggie, it's Lindsay, your self-proclaimed #1 fan. Thank you very much for listening, Lindsay. I have what I think might be a silly question, but I can't seem to find a straight answer anywhere. I've read through this, not a silly question, so we're going to address it for everybody. What happens if I move money around in my investment accounts? For example, I have a Charles Schwab brokerage account that my parents set up for me when I was little. Thanks, Mom and Dad, in parentheses. There's a fund with a high expense ratio that I'd like to move the money out of. I don't know if I get hit with fees if I reallocate the money to a different fund. So my question for you guys, do you think I should expect to get hit with the fees? And where should I be looking for answers for this sort of question? I must totally be missing the spot for these answers because I couldn't find it. Thank you both so much and hope you have a great weekend. It's actually quite timely because we got this message a couple weeks ago, but now we are ready for the weekend.
Can I tell you my answer before you give her
let's do it.
A more real answer? Because there's two options on this for what her question is. What I typically would do is you leverage Charles Schwab's customer service. Often Fidelity has amazing online chat, and you ask them, I'm not saying we're not going to answer it. We are, just to be clear, but when in doubt, recognize that all these brokerage firms have pretty good customer service. And you can ask them, like, I literally don't know how to. I want to take, this money and I want to transfer it here. And so I only say that as in, if I didn't have Mike to go to, I often do that, and it works. It's not quite as enjoyable as getting to catch up with Mike. But just don't forget that these companies do have customer service that will help you do a lot of these things. Now, Mike, you give a real answer.
That's actually a very good answer. Charles Schwab has the best customer service of any company I've ever worked for, hands down.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they're awesome. So yeah, chat with them, give them a call. They're all extremely knowledgeable. So the question about fees, first thing is that because this is a brokerage account, meaning it's taxable and different than what we are talking about today, which is going to be retirement accounts, you will get hit with capital gains tax. Now, if you have had this fund since you were a little kid, then you're going to have long-term capital gains, which are going to be quite low, perhaps zero, depending on your total income. But you will get that from the IRS at the end of the year.
Mike, can I clarify something? Because I think some stuff makes so much sense to you that you gloss over it. I may be wrong, but the capital gains taxes are the long-term. Those will hit because to do the transfer that she's talking about, you've got to sell one and then buy another. So it's on the selling of the old one that she thinks has a high expense ratio that she's going to you have to sell it first to buy the other. It's like not exactly a transfer per se, right? Yeah. I think that's an important point.
Ooh, thank you, Maggie. You are on fire today with the brokerage account knowledge.
Look at that.
All right. So yes, you will have to technically sell this. You will have to pay taxes on it. It will be possibly zero, if not relatively small. Now, as far as the actual fee for selling it, as far as I know, Charles Schwab eliminated all of their buying and selling fees. Now, there could be some funds, mutual funds, that still have like a $50 fee to process the transaction, or there could be some like strange thing where this fund has some cost to sell it. I don't think so, but you will know it when you go into trade, sell all, and go to the confirmation page. It will break down any cost associated with this transaction for you. It will not be a surprise.
The other thing I'd say is I wouldn't let a $50 fee stop me from doing what I want to do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What Lindsay is describing here, moving money out of a high-cost fund into a low-cost ETF, for example, is a great idea. You should absolutely do that if you're not thrilled with the performance of this other mutual fund.
Mike, do you think it's a great idea, even though she'll have to pay some capital gains taxes on it?
Well, if she's not happy with the long-term performance of that fund and wants to move it into something that is performing better or has a significantly lower cost with the same performance, then yeah, I think that is a good move.
Yeah.
Now, if she's making 20% a year on this fund, even if she's paying like a 1% fee, like maybe just keep it in there. It seems to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, it's a great point.
All right, Lindsay, thank you for the question. That was a good one. And hopefully it helps other people make some good decisions when looking at their brokerage accounts.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Roth IRAs today, right, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Super fun. We like to mix it up between, like, I liked your social post where it was Mike talks about money and then Maggie talks about her feelings about money.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's good that we mix these things up because while there is certainly, psychological and emotional aspects to money, it's also pretty technical, which I think turns people off to some degree, but isn't all that difficult. And if you can get over the technical hump, you can make a really big difference in your life. We're going to be talking about Roth IRAs. And when it comes to Roths and traditional IRAs, there's a bunch of different subtypes, but we're going to try to simplify this for everybody and give you some tangible advice for how to evaluate your choices, because in many cases it is either or with retirement accounts, and we want to make sure that we're giving you the tools to make the best decisions for yourself.
Let me ask you some Roth trivia, Mike.
Okay.
See how much you know about Roth.
I won't be able to answer any of these.
Because I was curious about this myself, because my question to myself was, how long have Roths even been around? It feels like a newer thing, not like newer in the past few years, but just like it wasn't something my parents had an option of. I'll put it that way. I don't remember that. And I remember IRAs. So how long has the Roth IRA been around? Do you know?
I'm going to say 1976.
No, the year I graduated high school.
1979?
Roth IRA? No, 1998 is when class of 98. What's up? It became a savings option in 1998, named after the late Delaware Senator William Roth. And then the Roth 401k, which we're going to talk about today also, is even newer. You know what year that is? That's just a baby.
2009.
2006. You were closer on that one. Anyways, I just thought that it would be good to know.
That's interesting. That's a lot newer than I thought.
And these were not, the point is, these were not choices our parents had. This is the first generation that's really getting to, choose and leverage these things. And so it's normal that we wouldn't fully understand how these work. It's not like this is something that, generations have had the opportunity to use and decide about. And so Mike, teach us new generations how to use Roths.
All right. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer on this. Not so much a disclaimer, more of a caveat. This type of information does not lend itself well to a podcast. So it is numbers heavy, and you need to really see numbers side by side to understand the key points. So we're going to do the best we can and hopefully share with you the key consideration for making decisions. But I would encourage everybody, if you're interested in this, to go look up articles about it online. There are millions of them. And going back to our Schwab thing, you can go to the Schwab website and see all this information, including all the numbers and the limits and how you do this stuff very clearly. So take this episode, figure out kind of what you want to go look at, and then go do more research and make your decisions. All right, that being said, there are two main types of retirement accounts, and this is going to be kind of a little refresher on some of our previous episodes. So 2 types of retirement accounts that the government creates benefits for. There's essentially IRAs and Roth IRAs.
I like to just the basics, Mike. IRA stands for an individual retirement account.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
And within the categories of IRAs and Roth IRAs, there are multiple types of accounts. The differences can be described very simply. An IRA is tax deferred, meaning you don't pay taxes on it now.
And when you say, Mike, when you say you don't pay taxes on it now, it means you pay taxes on it when you take the money out later in retirement.
That's exactly right. So you defer the time to which you pay taxes. A Roth IRA is the opposite. You pay taxes on the income now, and then when you withdraw the money from the account, you no longer pay taxes on it.
So let me give you an example, Mike. When I put in my $6,000 a year into my IRA, which is the individual limit of what I can put into an IRA each year, I'm actually able to reduce that $6,000 contribution from my taxable income, right? So I've not been taxed on that $6,000, right?
You personally or you figuratively?
What do you mean?
Well, you do not, because you are over the income limit, which means that your $6,000 contribution is not tax deferred. Now, for most people, when you make that contribution to a individual IRA, you can deduct that from your income.
But that's interesting. So I just want to understand this myself. So I'm not deferring the taxes. So when you say I'm paying the taxes on it later versus now, it sounds like it's just not a pre-tax contribution now.
Right.
Versus when I put money into a Roth IRA, I'm literally taxed on it. I've never put something in directly into a Roth IRA.
No. The money you are putting into a Roth has already been taxed.
But the money I'm putting into an IRA has also already been taxed. Like for me to have that $6,000 in cash. So it sounds like I am getting taxed twice on it.
Think of it like this. Like when you file your taxes, if you were under the income limit, TurboTax or whatever would give you the tax credit or the tax deduction for that $6,000.
So, yeah.
But now it's just like there's no deduction.
But that's my point. So for me, use me as an example. When we talk about tax deferred, what is actually being deferred then?
Just the earnings.
So when that $6,000 turns into $600,000, or let's just call it $10,000, and I'm 60 and I take out my extra $4,000, I'm taxed on the $4,000, not the $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it. It's confusing.
I know. And so a Roth IRA is going to be the opposite. You have paid taxes on your income now, and then you make your contributions to a Roth, and when you withdraw it, regardless of how much it's worth in the future, you no longer pay taxes. Now, both have their values depending on what your tax situation is now and in the future.
Which you don't know, right? You got to make your kind of best guesstimate of what you think it's going to be.
You're right. And you shouldn't lose too much sleep over it. But let me just give you the basic principle. Let's say you have $10,000 of income and you put it into one of these accounts and it grows at 20%. Okay? So here's the situation. If you have $10,000 of income and you pay no taxes now, so you put it into your 401k, which is a type of IRA, it grows 20% and is now worth $12,000. When you withdraw that, you pay 10% taxes. And so your net is $10,800. Okay? So 0 taxes at earnings, 10% taxes at withdrawal. So this is a tax deferred account. If you were to do this with a Roth, for instance, you would have $10,000 of income and same 10% tax. You now contribute $9,000 to your Roth. It grows at 20%. And then when you withdraw that at 0% taxes, because you've already paid taxes, it's worth the same $10,800. So if your tax rate is the same when you make your contribution and when you withdraw, there's no difference between these types of accounts. The benefit comes when you are avoiding taxes when they are going to be their highest and paying them when they're going to be their lowest. This is like the key part of the whole episode, so I want to make sure this is clear. So keep me honest, Maggie. Did that make sense?
Look, I'll be honest. It's like what you said at the very beginning of the episode. This is the sort of topic that's easier to read on a blog, and we will have show notes, by the way. It's just sometimes hard to read numbers out loud, and I'm a visual processor personally, and so I think what I want, so I'd say sort of like yes, sort of, Mike, but it's not you're explaining. It's just the fact that you're rattling off numbers out of a spreadsheet and someone's listening, and so I think again, people want to take away some of the kind of broader points, which is you want to think about when you believe your income will be highest versus lowest and make a strategic, informed, guess essentially, or a hypothesis of when you're going to be making the most money to decide, is a Roth better for you or is a regular IRA better for you? So again, I say that to say, don't get overly hung up in every single example and try to kind of understand the high level takeaways.
So said another way, if you are earning a lot of money right now and you're in a very high tax bracket, it likely means that a IRA or a 401k for most people with employment plans is going to be beneficial because you will be avoiding the very high tax rate now, and perhaps in the future when you're retired, you won't have as much income because you won't have as much expenses and you are better off. Now, if you are very early in your career and not making very much money, which means your tax bracket is low, then avoiding paying 10% taxes right now is not that great of a deal, because in the future, when you're going to withdraw this, maybe you're going to be paying 30%. So if you are a high earner, an IRA is likely better. If you are a lower earner, a Roth is likely better. But it really depends on your specific situation and what you think your life is going to look like in the future.
So Mike, in that example, I am a higher earner and I know that this is the highest I'll ever earn. I know that things are going downhill for me from here because of that I'm going to eventually retire and then become a lower.
I don't think downhill is the right term.
Yeah, downhill, uphill, but just financially downhill, right? So, but I still do the backdoor Roth IRAs, which we'll talk about because I'm not eligible for a normal Roth IRA. So do you think that's a bad idea? Because in the way you just explained it, I shouldn't even be messing with Roth IRAs.
That is a very good question, and we will touch on this later in the episode. When you are deciding between two types of accounts, and you can only do one, then what I described is how you should make your decision. What you're describing is not an either or, it is a either or and can I do an extra Roth contribution?
Mike, I think the other point that's helpful for people who might be a little kind of overwhelmed or stressed out by this level of detail and just the level of options that are out there is, I always joke, when you're trying to, forecast, which is the word I couldn't think of earlier, when you're trying to forecast when you might be at your highest income and you're trying to make all these decisions, look, don't overthink it, right? Which we'll probably say a number of times, because at some point I often will joke, if I'm wrong and I've predicted that actually my income will get higher over time and that it's, that my prediction was wrong or my forecast was wrong, that's not bad, right? Now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I have more money than I realized, right? So it's sort of like, your mistake in how you project something often, it just means you end up with more money than you realize you were going to have. And so I say that it's one of many examples of don't overthink this. If you're leveraging these tools, if you're starting to kind of max out the annual IRA limit, and max out your 401k, that primarily is what I would worry about, right? Is getting your spending down so that you can leverage these tools in the first place. If you happen to choose one that is technically, when you do a, detailed financial analysis, not as efficient of a tool for you as the other, you're still better off with either one, is my point. Right. And I think that's something people need to remember is don't get paralyzed by the option. Just start doing one or the other at some point, and you're better than if you wait a year and I'm well, I still can't decide what makes more sense for me. Yeah,
great point. All these plans have benefits, and it's great to save, whether or not you're reaching peak efficiency.
Yes.
Don't beat yourself up too much about it.
And peak efficiency is what we're talking about in today's episode. So the first step is just use these tools.
So Before I get into the types of Roths specifically, which this episode's about, let me just clarify, because Maggie, you're raising some good points that I forgot to include in the show notes. When we talk about IRAs, there are 401ks, which are employment-sponsored plans, which is a type of IRA. It's tax-deferred. There are individual IRAs, which is what you're describing, the $6,000 contributions. There are also SEP IRAs, which is a similar type of plan if you are self-employed. And so we are going to be talking about Roths specifically. And in most cases, you get to choose one or the other, but there are cases when you can have both. So let's talk about Roths. First type of Roth is what I think most people are aware of, the Roth IRA. It's a $6,000 contribution limit annually, or $7,000 if you are over 50. There are income limits, though, so the government does not allow you to take advantage of this plan if you earn too much, which, on a side note, good indicator that it is a valuable plan to take advantage of. If the government puts limits on it,
puts a cap on it, yeah,
it means that there's some value there.
But to that point, Mike, you're right about the government putting limits on it, but also the government creates a lot of backdoors on things. And so workarounds if you're, creative and well-educated. And so there is something called a backdoor Roth conversion, where if you're over that income limit, which I am, you are eligible for this backdoor Roth. And so it's literally, you can, again, like we said on the question we answered at the beginning, like whatever brokerage you use, I use Fidelity, but if you're using Charles Schwab, you can literally, I sometimes every year forget how to do the conversion, and I chat one of the Fidelity agents and they like send me the link and are like, here are the 3 steps you do. Right. You can very easily do this backdoor conversion to get into a Roth IRA, which basically means there's no income limits on Roth IRAs.
The next type of Roth is going to be a Roth 401k. And this is what you were saying launched in 2006. So it works just like an employer 401k, except you pay taxes on your income and then make your contributions. It has the same limit as a 401k, which is $19,500 if you're under 50. And you'll still get a match. And I think in most cases, I don't know the details of every company's plan, but think of it just like your 401k, except it's after tax.
Is that limit either or? So can
Yes.
you can do 19.5. No, so it's 19.5 across both of them, whether you do a regular, because some people I know do a regular 401k and a Roth and they might split it or something.
Right.
So it's not 19.5 plus 19.5.
Yes. Good point.
Got it.
Yeah. The government does not want you to do everything. Now, the last type of Roth, which is my favorite, probably because it has the coolest name, is not available at all companies, but it's called a mega backdoor Roth. And this one's pretty cool because what this is labeled as in your employer-sponsored plan is going to be called an after-tax 401k. And if you have this, you'll have 3 options. You'll have a 401k, a Roth 401k, after-tax 401k. You make your contributions up to $19,500 in either plan, and then you make additional contributions up to almost $40,000, which go in after tax. So you get your income, you pay taxes, you put it into this plan. What makes this really interesting is that when you leave the company, or if the company gives you periods of time where you can make rollovers, you take this after-tax money and then you roll all of it into a Roth. And so if you have $100,000 of after-tax contributions in this particular type of account, you can move that all into a Roth without paying a penalty. And then that money grows tax-free for the rest of your life. So you get away from the $19,500 limit in the Roth 401k or the $6,000 contribution limit in the traditional Roth IRA.
Does our company have a mega backdoor Roth?
No, ours does not.
Bummer.
I know.
I was like, this is a new. You would have told me about this by
I would
now.
have.
If we did.
I'd be shouting it from the rooftops.
Did the other large company you worked at previously have this?
It did. And so
you've done it.
When I was about 2 months out from leaving, and I knew I was going to be leaving, I was like, well, shit, I know I'm going to be able to take this money out and roll it into a Roth when I leave. So I put 100% of my income into after-tax 401k contributions and then made a substantial Roth IRA rollover with this money. It was kind of a big coup for me.
Nice.
Now, one quick note. You will pay taxes on the earnings when you make that rollover. So like, let's say you contribute $10,000 and you've made $1,000. When you leave the company and you roll over $11,000 into your Roth, you will pay ordinary income tax on $1,000. The $10,000 of your after-tax contribution will just roll over. Yep.
Okay. So let's recap and or share some of the reasons why Roths are so amazing, so people are really clear.
Let's do it.
Okay. The first one, which I have a statement and a question about, Mike, is that you will not pay taxes again on that money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is the first benefit. You know, if you have $60,000 sitting in your Roth IRA, it's $60,000 you get. You don't have to account for, the loss and whatever tax rate you're at at the time that you want to take that money out. But a question for you, Mike.
Okay.
Similar to the point you just made about capital gains on the mega backdoor Roth. When I take out the money, 10, 20 year, whatever, on my Roth IRA, will I be taxed on the gains?
No.
None of it.
No.
The gains are tax free.
Yeah.
That's the beauty. Honestly, this is something that when you were just talking, I was thinking about. It just clicked for me that is one of the amazing benefits, is that you're not taxed on the gains.
Yeah. I was going to say, you probably read the news about this, but I'm sure you have not seen.
I probably didn't.
You do not read the same news articles I do, but
was it about Bachelor in Paradise?
Peter Thiel, who
Yes.
started, I believe, PayPal and some other stuff. He's like a big investor.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing his name right. He made the news because he had a $4 billion Roth IRA. And what happened was
that's a lot of mega backdoors, huh?
Well, he had a modest Roth IRA because you can only contribute so much to these things.
Yeah.
But he invested it in his and other startups, which just exploded. So He has a $4 billion IRA or whatever the number is. I did not research this beforehand. And he's not going to pay taxes on any of those withdrawals. It's incredible. All right. So some more benefits of the Roth. It is, and actually, Maggie, this is what you alluded to. It's easier to plan your income in retirement when you know there are no tax implications to those withdrawals. And the last benefit is that you can roll these products eventually into self-managed Roth IRAs with Charles Schwab, for instance, with me, and have a lot of flexibility with how you invest that.
Nice. So now that we know all of this, what should people be doing?
First thing, and this applies for all company benefits, check your company plan to see if you have a Roth 401k and an after-tax 401k.
Okay, the next thing we've talked about a few times, and that is, consider if your tax bracket will likely be lower or higher in the future. So think about if you're, at your highest earning potential now. If you have plans to early retire, that would be a big factor in making that forecast. But it's an important thing to think through.
And as Maggie mentioned, if you're unclear about what the future is going to look like compared to your present tax rate, don't beat yourself up too much over it. If you are saving money and investing it, you're going to do great. Whether or not you're maximizing that efficiency, don't worry too much about it.
Yeah. Speaking of the word maximizing, I again would say focus on trying to maximize the dollar amounts, hit the annual limits that you're allowed to, so for me, it's $19,500 into a 401k and $6,000 into an IRA. Whether I move that IRA into a backdoor Roth IRA or whether I just keep it in my, traditional IRA is less important than just the fact that I'm maxing out those two retirement vehicles each year. That's the most critical thing to worry yourself about. So again, don't get paralyzed on this decision and not do the basic piece, which is just putting as much money as you possibly can into an IRA and a 401k.
The next thing you should do is, if you are eligible based on your income, and you can see these income limits on a number of websites, including the IRS website, if you're eligible, contribute to a Roth IRA. You can still do your 401k, but you can also contribute $6,000 to a Roth IRA and just get into the habit of doing that every year.
You can also consider switching your contributions from a 401k to a Roth 401k if you think your tax situation will favor it. So again, it's if your company even offers that, which ours does, right, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
I should know that probably. And again, think about, switching it. Some people even split it up, right? It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You could decide that you want to put, half your money into the traditional 401k and half into the Roth 401k.
And then lastly, as we've mentioned a few times, don't become paralyzed by the number of decisions that you could possibly make. The important thing is just to make contributions to your future. And if you make the wrong one, it's not going to be as big of a deal as you think. All right. So, should we wrap up with our top 3 takeaways, or is there anything else you think I should clarify, Maggie?
No, I think we can wrap this up, Mike.
All right, good. Number 1, Roth IRAs are an amazing tool to minimize taxes in the future.
Number 2, choosing between an IRA and a Roth comes down to being able to forecast your current taxes versus your future taxes. So you really want to think about when your tax bracket that you're paying is going to be the highest, and choosing a regular IRA versus a Roth based on what that forecast is for you personally.
And then lastly, this is just one tool for savings. So try to max out your contributions on a Roth and every other savings tool that you have available to you, because just one of these accounts is not going to be enough. You're going to need to be doing all of these things and doing them for a long period of time.
Okay.
All right. Well, I thought that was very fun. It wasn't a lot of feelings, but it was a lot of numbers, which I like. So thank you, Maggie.
It was a lot of finance. It was a heavy discussion for an early morning. But what a great way to start my weekend, Good energy.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, which you probably do on this topic, we'd love to hear from you, and you can always leave us a voicemail or a text at 404-981-3370, or you can always hit us up on Instagram also.
All right. Thanks, Maggie. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Have a Rothy weekend.
Thank you.
Possible. Remember we were talking about frothy a while back?
Yeah, now it's Rothy.
I don't remember which episode that was, and that someone said something about being frothy.
It was about home buying, like new home buyers.
A frothy market.
Yeah,
Someone called it a frothy market.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this case, this is a Rothy market, so
I'm not sure that one's going to stick as well.
We should have had this in the intro.
Yeah. Oh man, missed opportunity.
Missed opportunity. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.